So this video is going to be mostly focusing on the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! In order to do a guide for Master Duel before we jump into gameplay on a ladder. I kind of want to just break down, when I jump into the gameplay, what's happening. What are the rules? What are different mechanics of Yu-Gi-Oh! Different phases of each turn, different summoning mechanics. That's kind of what I want to cover in this video. I'm going to try and keep it concise and not ramble too long. Just give you the key information, and then when I jump into the duels, I can go into some more advanced stuff. But I just want to give players who are operating with no baseline, because they're completely new, something to work with. So, where do we start? What I think I want to start with is the basic rule set of a duel of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is between two people. Both of you are at 8,000 life points. The goal, not going through every single exception. The goal is to reduce your opponent's life points to 0. There's going to be a lot of times where I speak, and expert Yu-Gi-Oh! Players were like, actually, that's not true. Alternate win conditions exist. I'm not going to go through every single exception because, as I say, I'm trying to keep it concise. I'm trying to give you the most standard explanation, not going through every single exception that exists in the game, because we'd be here all day. And if you're here and you're a seasoned Yu-Gi-Oh! Player, this video is not really for you, so I don't know what you're doing here. Anyway, 8,000 life. How do you reduce your opponent's life points? Well, we do that by summoning monsters to the field. So let's talk about summoning. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a bit of a different restriction than a lot of other card games, in that the limitations on your turn have more to do with a once per turn normal summon. So we have normal summons and special summons. You can special summon as much as you want through your turn, but you can only normal summon once per turn. Going one step further to normal summoning, cards level 4 or lower can be normal summoned with no required setup. Cards level 5 and 6 require you to tribute a existing monster already on the field, and 7 and higher require you to tribute 2 monsters that previously set up on the field. And other limitations have to do with meeting your card's effects activation conditions, right? Sometimes you'll draw things that the setup isn't there, so it's a card in your hand, but it's not a resource you can use. That's another sort of limitation on Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's shared among a lot of card games, but it's just one of those things. Next up, we're going to talk about a couple of different kinds of special summons. The first one is Ritual Summon. Ritual Summon cards are kind of signified by this blue color on the card. So the way you bring out a ritual monster is by activating a ritual spell, tributing monsters whose total levels equal the level of the ritual monster, and then you can bring it to the field. And you can tribute those monsters from the field or from the hand. So a common idea in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is combining 2 or more monsters, and in this case, using a spell to tribute them off and summon something more powerful. So 2 monsters plus a spell, ritual monster, better monster. That's the general idea. The next summoning type to talk about is Fusion. Fusion is very similar to Ritual. It's combining 2 monsters plus a spell, but in this case, it's a fusion spell. And the levels, in this case, aren't really relevant. What's relevant is the specific material that the fusion card will list in its text. And similarly, fusion material can be on the field or in the hand. Eventually, Yu-Gi-Oh! Introduced a new kind of monster, synchro monsters. So when it comes to summoning the synchro monsters, they forgo the need of using the spell, but the caveat here is that both the monsters have to be on the field, and one of them has to be a particular kind of card called a tuner monster. And similar to ritual summoning, the levels of those 2 monsters have to add up to be equal to the thing that you're summoning. Next up, we have XYZ Summons. XYZ cards kind of look a little bit like this. The way that you summon these is, again, it's 2 monsters. No spell on this either. Has to be on the field, like Synchro Summoning. However, in this case, one of the monsters doesn't need to be a specific kind of card, like Synchro Summoning, tuner, and non-tuner. Both the levels need to be the same. So let's say I have 2 level 4s on the field. I can do what's called an overlay of those cards to put the XYZ monster on the field. One very important thing to note here about the XYZ monsters is that they don't have a level, they have a rank. If XYZ monsters also had a level, then you could use an XYZ monster with the material to summon another XYZ monster, and then you can get a bunch of material on your most powerful cards. And I guess it's just not a design decision that Konami wanted to go in, which is pretty understandable. I imagine it would cause a lot of issues and limit design space, but that's kind of getting outside the scope. The important thing to note, rules-wise, is that XYZ monsters have a rank, they don't have a level. This is where it gets a little bit complicated when it comes to Pendulum Summoning. So the theme that I've kind of been going through with a lot of these summoning mechanics is the idea of combining 2 monsters to make something more powerful through various means, right? With the ritual spell, a fusion spell, or one of them being a tuner, or the levels lining up. But this is a different kind of beast altogether. On a Yu-Gi-Oh field, you're kind of going to see on the left and rightmost spell trap card zones a kind of a special field marker. And that's where you put the new kind of card that they introduced, Pendulum Monsters. Now, Pendulum Monsters have 2 effects. They have an effect that you can activate when you put it in that spell trap card zone, and they tend to typically have an effect when you summon it as a monster to the field. Those effects are different, and so maybe if you're vaguely aware of the sort of Yu-Gi-Oh space, even if you haven't played it before, you'll see a lot of memes around these cards having way too much text on them. But it's mostly not because it's all one thing, it's because they have 2 different effects that apply depending on how you're using it. And that's why sort of sometimes there's a lot going on the card. So when it comes to summoning the monster to the field, it works the same as any other monster. When it comes to putting the card in your spell or trap card zone, that's when its pendulum scale number becomes relevant. When you place a low number and a high number into each of those zones, that lets you summon monsters from your hand or your extra deck whose levels exist between the numbers that you have set. So 1 and 7 in the spell or trap card zones, you can now summon monsters from your hand all at once whose levels are between 2 and 6. Any level 2s, any level 6s, anything in between, you can bring them straight to the field, so long as their levels are between your scale numbers. Now that might be a little bit complicated, but I'm going to try and show a quick example of this happening, and maybe you can follow along a little bit here. So I'm spending a little bit of time on the Pendulum Summoning mechanic because it is one of the more difficult ideas for a new player to try and understand, I do think. It's not as simple as combine 2 monsters into one monster that's potentially stronger, right? It's a bit more of a complicated idea, so I'm spending a bit more time on it. So I want to go over a couple of things I've already talked about, but I kind of want to show it to try and reinforce it. So this is a pendulum card. These are the zones that I was referring to earlier. So this card can go in this zone from the hand. I will now proceed to use some effects just to get a couple of monsters on the field. We just pitch something we don't need, and we will summon this card, which incidentally lets us summon this card. Right. So now I'm going to go over one of the other summoning mechanics we covered. 2 monsters on the field. Use your fusion spell. In this case, it's polymerization. I'm going to go ahead and activate that. And I'm going to go over another idea that I mentioned. The pendulum monsters don't go to the graveyard when they leave the field. They're going to go to the extra deck face up. So we're going to do that. We're using 2 monsters plus a fusion, stars into fusion, and summoning a fusion monster. Now that our cards are face up in the extra deck, as you can see, all the other monsters in here will be face down and won't be public knowledge to our opponent, but cards that have left the field like pendulums will be publicly known. Next up, we want to complete our scales. So right now we have a 7 here. We want to go ahead and place something on the other end of the scale. We want a low number. And so we will place a 1 down. Now we have 1 and 7. So we can summon from our hand or face up extra anything that has level 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So we'll go ahead and do that now. From the face up extra, we have a couple of options. 1, 2, and 3. And when you conduct a pendulum summon, all those 3 monsters are being brought to the field at the same time, and that is a pendulum summon. The very last one that I would like to talk about, the most recent summoning mechanic that they have introduced, is a link summon. Now, link monsters are a little bit of a return to simplicity, moving away from pendulums. It's much more about combining 2 monsters, two or more monsters, combining them, summon one thing that's potentially more powerful. It's going back to the idea of fusion, of Xyz, of ritual, of Synchro Summon, that kind of idea. When it comes to summoning it to the field, the only thing to consider is that the monsters need to be on the field. So 2 monsters on the field, you send them to the graveyard, you link them off, is another way of saying it, and you summon your link monster to the field. So link monsters don't have a level, much like Xyz, they operate a little bit differently. Link monsters have a link rating. If I were to have 2 monsters on the field and I would link them off and summon a link monster, that link monster would have a link rating of 2. It is equal to the amount of material I used to bring it to the field. When it comes to summoning link monsters of a higher link rating, you can use more monsters on the field. Summoning a monster with a link rating of 2 requires 2 monsters on the field. But if I want to summon a link monster with a link rating of 4, for example, what I can do is I can use 4 monsters on the field in order to summon it. The other thing I can do is use 2 link monsters that each have a link rating of 2, and that will add to a link rating of 4 and fulfill the requirement to summon that monster. So similarly, I just want to show you how sort of a link summon might operate, and how the link ratings of the monsters apply in order to help you link climb into different things, and fulfill certain requirements on our link monsters. So I'm just going to grab some material to the field to work with. So I'll just bring this to the field. I will use Machine Duke on this. Just grab a couple more of our despots. And just like that, we have the 4 monsters on the field to work with. Now from here, as I say, you have a couple of options. You can send them all to the graveyard to summon something that has a link rating of 4. That would fulfill the requirement. So we can, for example, send these away to summon something with a link rating of 4. And it's in the bottom right is the link 4 sort of indicator. That's how you can kind of tell what the requirement of this is. And you'll also see the text there, 2+ effect monsters. So we have the amount of monsters we need, and we have the kind of monster they need to be. Some monsters don't have effects, but in order to summon this, all the monsters used need to be monsters with effects. We're back to having our 4 monsters on the field. The other thing we can do is use 2 of them to summon something with a link rating of 2. And we can summon something else that has a link rating of 2 using the other 2. So we've used 2 for a link rating of 2, and the other 2 doing the same thing. With that out of the way, now we can conduct our link summon of our monster that has a link rating of 4 using 2 monsters that have a link rating of 2. And again, you can see the link rating in the bottom right of the card. So I'll send these away in order to summon our link 4 monster. A monster that has a link rating of 4. Okay, so we know the goal of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is to reduce our opponent's life points to 0. And the way we do that is by summoning monsters to the field. Now hopefully you've gained a better understanding of the different ways to do that. And we can proceed to the phases of each turn, which is what I want to discuss next.